Hi, this is segment 4. This is where I'm going to talk about gessos and maybe a couple of other little tips that I picked up along the way. There's actually a lot to the water-soluble oil paints that I could talk about, and I'll probably make a few more videos, but either this or maybe the next one will be my last one until maybe I get some feedback if people have any questions, something like that. Anyway, gesso makes a big deal to me, especially in water soluble. I guess it did when I did traditionals as well, but they seem to react differently with water soluble. The gessos do. So what I've ended up landing on is Utrecht makes some good stuff. I actually usually use this one, and there's a professional level as well, and they seem to have a lot of pigment, and they seem to have a high concentration of calcium carbonate, and makes it nicely opaque. But this seems to have an acrylic binder to it that is a little more elastic than some of the other gessos out there, and it seems like that elasticity is what seals the surface of the paint, the surface of the canvas really well. Whereas some of the cheaper stuff like this one here, while it's Utrecht and it still does a pretty good job, it doesn't have that elastomer or that sealant that keeps it from being porous. I went through a number of different gessos, and you know, in a pinch, when I run out of gesso, sometimes I'll just run to the hobby store and pick something up, and some of them were somewhat successful, others were horrible. The Weber brand one was probably the worst. It actually would cause the paint to react strangely, and then after it dried completely and you went to varnish it, it wouldn't come out even. You wouldn't get an even gloss coat over the top of it. So gesso definitely has a lot to say about what's going to happen with the finished product. So I'd recommend going with the Utrecht, and you know, honestly, this doesn't necessarily have to do with how expensive the gesso is. I've actually bought some pretty expensive gessos and had them not turn out that great. I used to spray on my gesso. I don't do that anymore, mostly because the spray on gessos are thin and cheap, and they don't seem to seal the surface of the canvas or the panel as much as I need it to. So I brush it on now, 3 layers. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll put this one on first, just as a base coat, and then 2 layers of this or 2 layers of the professional stuff. This is sufficient. It's good stuff. It works great. The professional level's just slightly better. I think it's a law of diminishing return. The step from here to here is really quite a jump. The step from here to here is not nearly as big a jump. So anyway, those are gessos. I really can't recommend any of the other ones really highly. I haven't used every gesso out there. There are a couple of Liquitex gessos that I think do a really good job. I actually really have been a fan with the Liquitex as well, but I stick with this Utrecht. It's kind of a thick, pasty consistency, which I'm not a huge fan of, because when you texture your surface, it's hard to get it smooth. If you want it smooth, it's really hard to do. So you've got to work really hard on that. A couple of tips that I thought I'd talk about really quick. First off, to understand water-soluble oil paints, what they've done is they've taken traditional oil pigments and mixed them with linseed oil and a binder, which isn't normally present in oil paints. And what this binder does is it actually will it'll attach it'll attach to a bipolar molecule and to the oil molecule. I don't know exactly what this binder molecule is made of, but it seems to have 2 separate properties that cause it to play with water and also with the oil paints. And once this binder dries, once the oil paint dries itself, the binder deactivates. And at first I thought that sounded like bunk. It sounded like it was just a way to sell paint. But I did a number of test pieces, and I put them through the ringer. I took some Brillo pads, some sandpaper, some water, all kinds of detergents and stuff like that. And once they're fully dry, they really are every bit as permanent and every bit as, shoot, they're almost bionic. They really do. I was concerned that once the paint dried, you could get water and scrub the paint off, but that doesn't happen. They really have come up with some sort of a binder that actually functions the way that they said it does, which is a really good thing, because even though I think water soluble still has a ways to go with research, I mean, I think it can be improved. I do think a number of companies have come up with some great stuff, and if you pick and choose your materials, I think you can come up with some really good stuff. A lot of people have said that it's different from traditional oil paints, and that is absolutely true. There's no question about it. They are different. Some might even say inferior quality, and to a certain extent that's probably true, mostly because the research, the technology is behind. But there are some products out there that have really come to the point where the professional artists can use water-soluble oil paints, and they're every bit as professional and lasting as any of the other oil paints out there. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll see that Holbein, I think, is one of the best companies at it. They've done a really good job with their paints. Mediums, on the other hand, are fewer and farther between. It's hard to find good mediums, it seems like, and I think they're still getting there. But the Winsor & Newton medium is fantastic. They do seem to act different from traditional oils, but I think what people have a hard time realizing is that it's not a replacement for oil paints. It really isn't. If you were to shift from oil paints to acrylics, you wouldn't expect your acrylics to act the same way that you expect your oil paints to. It is a different medium. It really is. So there's a learning curve. You're going to have to buckle down and understand it. When you're thinning stuff out with water, it's different. It's just not going to act the same way as your turpentines. It's not going to act the same way as your solvents. But the question is, can you come up with a method that puts you in the place where you need to be to create great art? And the answer is yes. It might take some trial and error, and I hope that these videos have helped you along the way. But they're really doing good stuff with water soluble, and I think it's a really good direction that most artists are going to want to go. If you value your health, or if you value the environment, because water soluble is just it seems like the natural evolution. Yeah, some people have said that the water soluble oil paints seem to be bland or heavy-handed, or lack a certain vitality, and in large part that's true. That's why you need to pick and choose the stuff that you're going to use, because some of them are fantastic and others are really kind of pathetic. I hate to say it that way, but it's true. A couple things that you probably want to know also. If you're painting in plein air with water soluble, you're going to deal with the elements. What you're going to need to do is get a nice umbrella, or paint inside your car or something, because if you use the water soluble outside, they are, and it starts to rain, they'll run. And it's like painting with watercolors outside. You got to be careful of the elements. You can paint outside with traditional oils, no problem, even if it comes pouring down. You can handle it, but water soluble is not the same way, so just a word of warning for that. I hope some of this has been helpful to you, or it gives you an idea of what to expect from traditional oils as opposed to the water soluble. Water soluble have a lot to offer, and I think you can do a really good job with them. It's just it's not cut and dry. It's not simple to shift from traditional to water soluble. So I will bid you adieu.